The city of Kronstadt, Sovetskaya Street. Let's find out what this street owes to Catherine II, to terrible fires, and Nicholas I. This street is beautiful. Its strict, slender architecture is fascinating, but there are many secrets in this street. For example, why is there an extra G on the pedestal of the Bellingshausen monument? Let's take a walk along Sovetskaya Street together, reveal its secrets. Be inspired by these parallel architectural worlds of the truth, by the Kronstadt contrast. One world was created to support another, but in the end, history had its own way. How did Sovetskaya Street appear? Who invented it? What role was assigned to her? Let's start by looking down on our heroine. Its history began in 1761 year, when the architect Savor Ivanovich Ivakinsky created the General Staff of Kronstadt. In it, almost all the buildings have been changed. For the first time, the outlines of the channel appear, which will later become a bypass. For the first time, we see the idea of the main street of the city from the north side of the canal. Only this plan was never approved. They returned to him only after 20 years. Whether it's the architectural power, a visualization, or a series of random events, but they broke out in two fires, from which our street was embodied as a phoenix. July 23rd, 1764. A terrible fire destroys most of the city Petrovsky buildings. On the 13th of May, 1783, the St. Petersburg Admiralty caught fire and suffered very seriously. It would seem, what does this have to do with it? And very much so. Women's experiences, especially if it is the experience of the Empress, can work wonders. The Admiralty in St. Petersburg is located too close to the Winter Palace, and Catherine II, who ruled at that time, did not want to put up with the constant threat of a repeat of the fire, and with a light hand, issued a decree dated May 28, 1783, on the transfer of the Admiralty to Kronstadt. A special commission had to deal with this idea. Once again, Ivakinsky's plan was put on the table. The Admiralty found the perfect place, and the water channel acquired a new function, in addition to transport, to protect the city from fire. Therefore, we decided to make our unique street, along the northern part of the canal, wide and clean. One construction plan was proposed by the Commission. The second plan was drawn up by the chief commander of the Kronstadt port, Admiral Samuel Karlovich Grake, who was not a professional architect at all, and Catherine II approved his plan. Grake was put in charge of the construction of the Admiralty, and Mikhail Nikolaevich Vatoshnikov became the architect of almost all the buildings put up, whose remarkable abilities and talent we can still evaluate personally with our own eyes. In 1789th year, they began to dig the Admiralty, Port, Catherine, and now the bypass canal. In the center of Kronstadt, granite laid out not only its shores, but also the bottom. The work was more than large-scale. In 12 years, a rope-spinning factory with a small naya and a pink shed, a biscuit factory, a blacksmith shop, 7 shops, 3 workshops for the manufacture of sails, several outbuildings and residential buildings were built. However, the grand housewarming never happened. It took too much energy, effort, and besides, the officials did not smile at all at the idea of leaving the brilliant capital and moving to distant Kronstadt. So after the death of Catherine II, officials wiped the sweat from their brows and refused to think about transferring the Admiralty to Kronstadt at all. But all this was not in vain. Almost a quarter of the city occupied by the Admiralty, even if not completely completed, brought considerable benefit to the domestic fleet. And for you and me, the greatest value of that undertaking of Catherine II is, of course, the heroine of our issue. Today, we can enjoy the aesthetics of the destruction of the mysterious and unattainable southern shore of the bypass canal. Given the pace of development of Kronstadt, we are sure that everything will be restored soon. And today, let's walk along the path of Catherine Square, thoughtfully looking at the signs of the hectic past. Interesting fact. Previously, There was no Catherine Square, and all transport drove up to the water channel itself, where we are now. Barges and barges docked here, lifting mechanisms of Admiralty warehouses, tirelessly pulled valuable cargo, and these pillars silently tell the story of the destroyed bridge. Who walked on it? What was he thinking about, looking at St. Andrew's Cathedral there, in the distance, in the channel alignment? What kind of ghost of the past has your imagination thrown up? By the way, the imagination of tourists, judging by reviews on the internet, sometimes draws a prison on the other side, fenced with a moat with water. And we will throw up for your imagination the dashing ghosts of the past, running along the barges passing by. We are transported to 1903 year. We change the destroyed bridge to this native Soviet one. In 1903 year, it was built for passage to the sea cathedral under construction, the pearl of our city. It was a drawbridge. At first it was called Anchor, and after the revolution it became Soviet. And imagine, it was bred on the mountain to passers-by from 9 to 10 o'clock in the morning, from 4 to 5 o'clock in the evening. For the passage of barges, crowds were gathering on both sides of the canal. Especially brave and always late young people risked their lives to rush to the barges passing through the canals, and moved to the opposite side. Of course, a friend of the sailors. In the 30s, the movement of barges stopped. In 1972, the bridge was dismantled, and in 1974, traffic was opened on a new, non-navigable one. We continue to monitor the appearance of Gospodskaya Street, which has already become such a native street for us. Let's turn to the northern part of this street, to this parallel world, full of the life of the modern spirit, to a kind of boiling point, with plasma TVs behind ancient facades, and cappuccino in the hands of passers-by. A good half of this side of the street from Gostiny Dvor to Rochelle Square was created, so that all prospective immigrants from the St. Petersburg Admiralty had a place to live. And here again, it is impossible to stay within one street. Let's look wider, higher, to see this truly unique monument of the Catherine era, the most exemplary military town of Russia of those times. Simultaneously with the construction of the Admiralty, work was in full swing on the construction of this ensemble of officers' and servants' wings, as we can see from the drawing, by the same Mikhail Vatoshnikov, 4 officers' wings stretched along the canal, flanked by courtyards with stables and carriage sheds. Servants' wings were built perpendicular to them. There are absolutely identical services between the servants' wings. All wings are 3-storied, military-style, strict geometric clarity, conciseness of composition and architecture, exceptional strength, which has already been tested by the Kronstadt residents for about 230 years. To save money, they built, quote, on the Dutch image of brick, not plastered on the outside, that is, without plaster. Here he is the prototype of the modern loft style. And, attention, the key moment in the formation of our street. Right here, between the servants' and officers' wings, Catherine Street adjoined, a kind of modest great-grandmother of the Soviet one. June 26, 1834. A significant date for the heroine of our issue, almost a birthday. Nicholas I, during his trip to Kronstadt, saw great potential in the space between the bypass canal and the officers' wings, and ordered the main thoroughfare to be built here. He ordered the officers' wings to be rebuilt with clean rooms to the south, and the black rooms to be arranged to the north. To implement the idea of Nicholas I, architect Edward Christianovich Anert drafted 2 new officers' wings. By 1838 year, they were built, but the finishing was completed only by 1843. The buildings differed little from the first wings designed by Vatoshnikov. The facades were also laconic and typical of late classicism. One of the innovations is the semicircular completion of the windows of the second floor. By 1858 year, the first, second, and fourth officer wings were rebuilt according to a similar project. What came out of it, we can already see with our own eyes, but the third wing suffered a very special fate. But we will tell about this in the second part of our issue. So, Catherine Street has become big, very big. After all, according to the memoirs of contemporaries, the distance from the bypass canal to the outbuildings was called ugly. And that is why Catherine Square has become a successful architectural embodiment on this street. Fadil Fadivich Belaskausen gave Bolshaya Yekaterinskaya its final green and cozy look. You know that we owe this brave discoverer not only Antarctica. He was the chief commander of the Kronstadt port, the military governor, and what else? According to a certain Nordman,
his work engrossed his time completely, so it seemed that he did not even have time to rest. But no, his warm soul required another kind of intensified activity. He was thinking of our younger brothers, the sailors, whose position he wanted to improve significantly. As soon as the active service of the admiral was over, he returned to another idea he loved: to find means to decorate this service city, wherever possible, with trees and greenery.
Yes, Fadil Fadivich was a notable gardener, and the glory of Kronstadt, as a very green city, was largely due to Bellingshausen. Catherine Square is also the admiral's idea. It was broken up in the period from 1839 to 1843 year. Every day, thousands of Kronstadt residents walk through this wonderful but very long park, combining business travel with a walk under the shade of oaks, maples, firs, and chestnuts. The monument to Fadil Fadivich Bellingshausen was designed by the sculptor Ivan Nikolaevich Schroeder. The pedestal was designed by Polai Antonovich Maniti. Look, on the pedestal, the admiral's surname is spelled out as Bellinghaus. That is, one letter more is carved than is written in printed texts. The fact is that the kindest Fadil Fadivich himself preferred to save Russian people from the need to break the language. But the author of the monument decided to stay closer to the original spelling of the admiral's surnames. A monument to Peter Leonidovich Kapitsa was also erected in the park in 1979 year, and the place was chosen not by chance. In Soviet times, a monument to the heroes was necessarily erected twice in their homeland. Pyotr Leonidovich spent his childhood in a wooden house on the opposite side of the Obvodny Canal. Just opposite, a monument to the Nobel Prize winner in physics was erected. In this issue, we told you about how Sovetskaya Street appeared, how its geometry appeared, even with the participation of the imperial personages. And in the next part of our issue, we will tell you about every house on the north side of the street, and it will be very interesting. See you later.